Oh hey, I didn't see you there. I was busy fishing away down here. Hold up, let me come over. Wow, it's been 2 weeks. Let me see how much money I've made. My money! That was weird. Anyways, oh that's right, the idle part doesn't exist anymore. So I need to make something that automatically fishes, because it's an idle game and all. Originally, I thought of having people be the auto fisher until I thought about it a little bit harder. I don't know about you guys, but buying people and forcing them to work without pay seemed a little against my morals. So I had to think of a different idea. I landed on machines. It's perfect. Machines will sit on the dock collecting fish for the player. The fish are stored in machines until the player or the fish transporter has collected them, but I'll explain the fish transporter another time. Okay, back to the auto fishers. Firstly, the player has to buy them. On the dock there will be a green buy plus hovering up and down. On it will be a price value. Once the player has enough money for the respective world, the auto fisher can be purchased. Once bought, the auto fisher will pop up and automatically start fishing. The auto fisher works pretty similar to how the player's fishing works. The auto fisher will cast its bobber into the water. After a short duration, the auto fisher will randomly catch a fish based on the same calculations as the player, which I talked about in my previous video. The auto fishers are in a looping animation. I made an animation class which is essentially a repeating timer that updates the image of the object. For the final frame of the auto fisher, I have a callback function set that calls the catch fish function. This then puts a random fish into the auto fisher to later get collected by the player. The collection system is simple. All players have to do is left click the auto fisher to collect the fish. Both the player and the auto fisher have a list of fish that are currently on hand. It's a list that contains the ID and the number of each fish. When the fish are collected from the auto fisher, each list is then compared and combined into the player's hand. Okay, time for UI. When thinking of UI, I normally think of a window taking up the whole screen, but I wanted something a little different. I wanted a UI that would blend into the environment, so I came up with this. It's a little window that pops up from the auto fisher in the same isometric fashion as the rest of the game. As tiny as it is, there are still a few things that you can do. Starting from the top, this is the level up bar. This shows the auto fisher level and its percent to max upgrade. Next is the level up multiplier. These are helpful buttons to increase the auto fisher more than once per click. 1x is only 1 upgrade, 10 is 10 upgrades, and max is as much as the player can afford. And finally, at the bottom is the level up button. The button tells the price of the auto fisher's upgrade cost. As you can tell, there are different colors on the level progress bar. This change in color happens every 10 levels. While every level improves stats, each 10 levels gives a great boost to its efficiency. There is also a more complicated view including stats. This is what the hamburger button is for. Once pressed, another menu will open. This menu contains a more detailed view for players that like seeing these stats. It will show the name and the number at the top, the level again, how full the auto fisher is, and fish per second, and money per second. FPS, or fish per second, is how many fish the auto fishers catch per second, while the MPS, or money per second, is the average price of what the auto fisher will catch converted to currency. To find the FPS is pretty simple. First, we need to see how fast the auto fisher fishes. At level 1, the auto fisher takes about 0.1 seconds for each frame, and there are 40 frames. This means that it'll take 4 seconds to catch each fish. Now to get the fish per second is 1 over that value, so 1/4 fish per second. Now that we have this value, calculating MPS is a lot easier. For this value, we need to also calculate the average price of the fish based on its currency and percentage. I did this by multiplying each fish's percent to its price, then adding all the prices up. This would leave us with the value of 2.05, but this isn't the final value. Right now, this value is the average price of the fish per cast, not per second. We need to then multiply the 2.05 times the FPS. So 2.05 times 0.25 is about half a fish per second. I haven't even started thinking about messing around with these values to see what would make sense. Right now, these are just the first numbers that came to my mind. So if anything seems too good or really bad, it's likely to get changed later. Great, now that the auto fishers can catch fish, the offline earnings should work, right? Well, it's not that easy. There's a lot more I gotta do before AFK earnings work. If I reopen the game, the auto fisher isn't even there. This is because I don't have any way of saving the game state. I wish there was a magical function that allowed me to save the game exactly where I was. Oh wait, there is. But I had to program this magical function, which took hours and hours to do. Well, this is what the save function looks like. The code starts off by making an OFStream variable and opening it. Then the code uses the serialize function from a library called alpaca. This is a very useful function. It converts the structures storing all the data into a list of 8 bits. Luckily for us, chars are also 8 bits, so I then converted all the bytes to chars and wrote it into the save file. which looks something like this. The save data is a variable where I put all the data I want to save. Right now, that data would be a list of autofisher data, including if unlocked, level, and fish in storage. Great, now that we can save data, we also need to load it. The second magical function I made is a load function. This does pretty much the same thing as the save function, but in reverse. This time, the code creates an iOfstream variable and checks to see if the file exists. If it doesn't, then most likely this is the first time the player has launched the game, or there's some sort of error. If there is a save file, then the data is deserialized and the save data variable is set. Okay, now that the save data works, offline earnings should work now. Nope, still gotta make that. To do this, I also have to save a time variable to the save data. With this variable, we could do simple calculations at the beginning of the game. From here, we find the time difference between when the last save was and the current time. With this time, we can then use the handy function I made earlier, the one that calculates FPS of the autofisher. I converted the time difference to seconds, then multiplied that by the FPS. This should then give us the perfect amount of fish. But the autofishers have a max amount of fish that they can carry. Before we do anything else, we gotta clamp these values. Essentially, if more fish than storage, then num equals storage space num. Alright, now that we have the correct number of fish, we have to actually add them to the autofisher. This is as simple as multiplying the fish's percent by the fullness of the autofisher. This should give a perfect average of what would be inside. If my calculations are correct, then I should have around 302,000 fish for next video, or about 620,000 money. For an investment of only $10, this is about a 6,000,000% increase, which is way better than any stocks or crypto. And it's not even taxed. Or is it? Sorry, I don't know what that was. Anyways, I'm not really sure what the topic of the next video is going to be. If there's anything you want to see, leave a comment down below. And in the meantime, you could watch this video. Boy.